Tonight on the Worldview Report, President Trump is publicly questioning for the very first time the safety and effectiveness of his Operation Warp Speed vaccine program. This is great news. President Trump cracks down on Palestinian visas, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announces the federal government will launch its first ever large-scale study into the possible connection between psychiatric medication and mass shootings in the United States. Pope Leo makes his first statement on gun control, and a powerful earthquake kills hundreds in Afghanistan. France orders its hospitals to prepare for World War III with Russia. And Rudy Giuliani is seriously injured in a car crash. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. I'm Brandon House. We start off tonight with President Trump publicly questioning for the very first time the safety and effectiveness of his Operation Warp Speed vaccine program. Last month, a CDC advisory committee, they launched a review into the safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines, as well as whether mRNA remains in the body longer than advertised. As part of the review, the document states that they will look at gaps in existing knowledge relating to biodistribution, persistence of the spike protein, mRNA, and lipid nanoparticles to inform immunization recommendations. In other words, they'll be looking at whether the vaccine has ever worked, as well as harms it may have caused and be causing. As many watchdog medical experts have noted, studies have found that the spike protein and mRNA in the vaccines persist for some time. Days after the committee was announced, the Department of Health and Human Services, they announced that Susan Monterez, who championed mRNA shots for COVID-19, is no longer director of the CDC. This is after she clashed with Secretary Kennedy over vaccine policy, which ultimately led to her firing. As the leadership crisis at the CDC unfolds, President Trump, he issued, a somewhat cryptic statement to Truth Social. That was on Sunday, challenging Pfizer and other vaccine makers to make public the same great claims his administration was shown in order to justify Operation Warp Speed. Here's what President Trump wrote, quote, "It is very important that the drug companies justify the success of their various COVID drugs. Many people think they are a miracle that saved millions of lives. Others disagree. I have been shown information from Pfizer and others that is extraordinary, but they never seem to show those results to the public. Why not? With CDC being ripped apart over this question, I want the answer, and I want it now," end quote. According to President Trump, drug makers need to, quote, "clear up this mess," end quote. And then he added that, quote, "let everyone rip themselves apart, including Bobby Kennedy Jr. and CDC, trying to figure out the success or failure of the drug companies' COVID work," end quote. Meanwhile, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, the Surgeon General for the state of Florida, says that the American medical establishment has developed a cult-like obsession with vaccines. Here he is in an interview with Steve Bannon.
If you will, with a bunch of CDC employees leaving their office and going to support these leaders that have resigned. And, I listened to what they had to say, and there's this cultish relationship with vaccines, and this leadership is just unable to objectively evaluate science. And when it comes to vaccines, it's just there's only one possible answer. And if the science doesn't agree, then the science needs to be bent. So you need good leaders who can objectively look at the science.
Weeks after the Trump administration paused approvals of visitor visas for the people of Gaza. The New York Times now reports that the administration has broadened the suspension to cover nearly all categories of visitor visas for Palestinian passport holders. The New York Times cited an August 18th State Department cable that was sent to U.S. embassies and consulates abroad, detailing new sweeping measures that would bar many Palestinians from entering the U.S. on various types of non-immigrant visas. Cable was obtained by the media outlet and confirmed by 4 anonymous U.S. officials. Affected Palestinian visas include medical treatment, university studies, visits to friends or relatives, and business travel. U.S. consular officers, they have been instructed to invoke Section 221G of the Immigration Nationality Act. That's a legal provision that allows them to refuse visa applications from Palestinian passport holders temporarily. Last month, the State Department, they halted visitor visas for the roughly 2 million Palestinians from Gaza. This came shortly after Laura Loomer called incoming flights a national security threat. The national security threat Loomer could be describing appears to come from one of her ex-posts, where she stated, quote, "We have been totally infiltrated by Islamic jihadists. The Palestinian movement is a terrorist movement," end quote. LiveZet reports that Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Thursday said that the federal government will launch its first large-scale studies into the possible connection between psychiatric medication and mass shootings in the United States. This is something we have covered here for probably 15 plus years. Interviews going back that far with Dr. Peter Breggin, one of the premier experts on this, who's testified as a psychiatrist in many of the major school shooting trials. So this is very good news. Kennedy's remarks, they came during a joint press conference in Texas with Governor Greg Abbott. That's where the two were discussing rural hospitals. His comments followed the Minneapolis Catholic school shooting last week, in which Robin Westman killed 2 children and injured 17 others before turning the gun on himself. Secretary Kennedy said, quote, "I certainly consider mass shooting a health crisis, and we are doing, for the first time, real studies to find out what the ideology of that is. And we're looking for the first time at psychiatric drugs," end quote. Kennedy emphasized that firearms have long been part of American life, but that the rise of mass shootings is a relatively recent phenomenon. He explained, quote, "Americans have had guns in this country forever. When I was a kid, we had shooting clubs at our school. People, kids, my classmates, other people, they would bring a .22 rifle with them at school and park it in the parking lot. Nobody was shooting," end quote. He's right about that. In other news, France, they've put hospitals on a war footing, ordering them to prepare for the day Europe is plunged into an all-out conflict with Russia. Health officials have been told to brace for a, quote, "major engagement," end quote, by March of 2026, with chilling instructions to be ready to treat a flood of wounded troops from across the continent. According to documents obtained by a French media outlet, the plan assumes France will become a hub for battlefield casualties. It would need to absorb hundreds of injured soldiers from both its own forces and those of its NATO allies. That's what the documents state. The French Ministry of Health said the order was designed to anticipate, quote, "prepare and respond to the health needs of the population while integrating the specific needs of defense in the health field," end quote. Among the risks identified, officials warned that there were the prospects of a huge influx of foreign victims. The ministry blatantly admitted, quote, "It is therefore a question for our health system of anticipating the care of military patients in the civilian health system," end quote. So, here's the question. Is NATO planning for World War III with Russia to break out within the next 6 to 12 months? because it certainly looks that way. And given the fact that Europe is woefully unprepared to take on Russia on their own, are they counting on the United States to fight yet another war on their behalf? Again, this appears to be the case. The Trump administration has appointed Jim O'Neill, a Silicon Valley investor and longtime government official, as the acting director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. His appointment comes one day after the firing of former CDC Director Susan Menarez. O'Neill currently serves as Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services. It's a role he assumed in June. According to Times Now News, O'Neill previously held a senior position at HHS during the George W. Bush administration as Principal Associate Deputy Secretary. The outlet noted that outside of government, O'Neill is best known for his ties to Silicon Valley technocrats. He is the former CEO of the Thiel Foundation. That's a philanthropic organization funded by billionaire tech investor and Trump donor Peter Thiel. We'll be right back after this break. The businessman from Texas that spent years trying to bring the perfect red heifers to Israel is coming to speak in Collierville, Tennessee, outside of Memphis, on Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. They now have sacrificed one of those red heifers. There it is burning. They've now gained 10 gallons of ashes. Why do they need this? Well, the Old Testament, Numbers chapter 19, says that for the purification ceremony, for their temporary tabernacle or full-time temple, they need the ashes of a perfect red heifer. This is the first time this has happened in over 2,000 years. The story is going global. It's highly controversial. In fact, there's even a connection between the attacks on Israel on October 7th and these 5 red heifers. Come and hear him speak live in person, Friday night, October 3rd, Saturday, October 4th. Full details, worldviewstore.com, and to get your tickets, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. Welcome back. Well, it's coming up fast, the 22nd annual National Worldview Weekend. It's about a month away now. And we got people registering from all over the country. Saw someone register the other day from Washington State. Yep, they are coming from every direction of the United States into beautiful Collierville, Tennessee, for the Friday night, Saturday conference. All the speakers live in the building. And don't forget about the Thursday night optional concert banquet with a keynote speaker. I'll have my grand piano there, my piano player, and a classical guitar player who is an Emmy Award-winning, Dove Award winner, will be accompanying the piano and myself as I'll do a few numbers for you, and then we'll bring out Hadia Maramonde to give a keynote presentation. That's the Thursday night optional concert foundation banquet and keynote address. So Thursday night, that's option. It's there at worldviewstore.com. And then Friday night and Saturday, don't forget, we've added in Byron Stinson, the man that brought the 5 red heifers to Israel, along with Gordon Chang and many other speakers. All that's going on in the world, folks. Don't you want to understand the times? Go to worldviewstore.com if you're interested and check out the long list of topics we'll be talking about. It is going to be one that you do not want to miss. That is, if you want to understand the times. Now, there's nothing like being here in person to meet the speakers and fellowship together. But if you can't make it, we are allowing you, if you have a membership to our vault, to live stream it. But you have to have a membership. You can get one of those at worldviewtube.com/vault. worldviewtube.com/vault. We'd love to have you with us one way or the other. In other news, Children's Health Defense conducted an interview with Cece Doucette of Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And she laid bare the shocking truth about the silent killer in your pocket. Our own government, they spent $30 million on the National Toxicology Program study, only then to bury its findings that indeed, cell phone radiation causes cancer and DNA damage. Doucette highlighted how Italy's Ramazzini Institute replicated these same results with cell towers. Even the World Health Organization labeled radio frequency, or RF, radiation, a possible human carcinogen. That was back in 2011. Yet, instead of protecting families, deep state bureaucrats and big cronies, well, they have silenced science, allowing this invisible poison to invade our bodies, while politicians on both sides of the aisle push for more 5G towers, all in the name of so-called progress. As she demanded, quote, how long will they keep ignoring the truth, end quote. Well, this is a question coming to the front as RFK Jr., who is now HHS Secretary under President Trump, well, he vows to expose this corporate government conspiracy that's killing Americans for profit. Watch this.
I just won a big suit against FCC. In the Court of Appeals for lying to the public about cell phone radiation, about the cell phone safety. And see, FCC now has to go back and redo all of its regulations on your cell phones. Cell phone, if you got a kid, don't ever let him put his cell phone near his head, and don't let him carry it in one of his front pockets. If it's a girl, don't let them carry the cell phone in their breast pocket. Don't let them carry them anywhere near their ovaries. And the farther the cell phone is from your head, when you're talking, the better off you are. So, there's tens, literally, this is not hyperbole when I say tens of thousands of studies that show the really extreme dangers of cell phone radiation. And people are not paying attention. A lot of our kids sleep with the cell phone right next to their heads. They fall asleep with them on the bed. Don't let them do that. Get that cell phone. And if you can get away from them at night so that they get 8 hours without it anywhere near them, that is really important.
An upcoming news conference with victims of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein could be explosive. So predicts one of the congressmen pushing for full release of the files on Epstein. Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, said the victims' accounts will force lawmakers to vote on a bill requiring the Justice Department to release its files. Representative Khanna and Thomas Massie, they are co-leading the effort, and they need 218 signatures to make that happen. With all 212 Democrats backing the effort, only 6 Republicans need to sign on. Khanna said on NBC's Meet the Press with Kristen Welker that this was their goal. He said in remarks that aired on August 31st, quote, what will be explosive is the September 3rd press conference that both of us are having with 10 Epstein victims, many who have never spoken out before, end quote. At the news conference that is to be held on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, he said Epstein's victims, quote, will be saying clearly to the American public that they want the release of the Epstein files for full closure on this matter, end quote. Rudy Giuliani was hospitalized over the weekend with multiple broken bones. That was after his vehicle was struck from behind at a high speed. This took place in New Hampshire. This is according to his spokesperson. According to that spokesperson, Giuliani, he suffered fractured vertebrae, multiple lacerations and contusions, as well as injuries to his left arm and lower leg. The crash occurred on Saturday night. According to New Hampshire State Police, troopers were responding to a report of domestic violence on the southbound side of the interstate, Interstate 93, when they saw the crash involving Giuliani on the northbound side of the highway. A Honda driven by a woman identified as 19-year-old Lauren Kemp reportedly hit the back of a Ford that Giuliani was riding in, which was being driven by his associate, Ted Goodman. That's according to state police. All 3 were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Both vehicles were heavily damaged, according to police. And the spokesperson said that before the crash, Giuliani was flagged down by a woman who was a victim of domestic violence. He rendered assistance, contacted 911, and, quote, remained on scene with her until responding officers arrived to ensure her safety, end quote. Giuliani's son, he is the head of FIFA, the task force for the White House 2026. He put out on social media that he's honored to have a dad like Rudy Giuliani and that he is a tough guy, the toughest he has ever seen. Well, now it's time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. The Post-Millennial reports that Pope Leo XIV, he used his weekly address at the Vatican to denounce what he described as a global pandemic of arms, offering his first direct comments on gun control. That's since becoming the head of the Roman Catholic Church. The remarks, they came just days after the August 27th attack at Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. It, of course, was carried out by a transgender shooter. And in that tragedy, 2 children were killed and 18 others injured. The Chicago-born Pope told those gathered in St. Peter's Square, quote, "Let us plead to God to stop the pandemic of arms, large and small, which infects our world," end quote. Speaking in English, Leo said he was praying for the, quote, victims of the tragic shooting during a school mass in the American state of Minnesota, end quote, as well as for, quote, countless children, end quote, harmed by gun violence daily. Well, his comments, they marked a notable moment as the first American pope who until now had refrained from directly addressing gun control laws. The Pope's position, well, it continues a view that's been held by his predecessor, Pope Francis, who regularly condemned gun manufacturers and warned that the civilian use of guns had become a dangerous habit. Leo has likewise spoken out against the logic of weapons and the profit-driven arms industry. Questions about Leo's views on gun control, well, they resurfaced after reports that a now deleted X account was linked to Robert Prevost. That's prior to his election as Pope Leo. These are tweets he had shared calling for stronger gun control laws. Among them were statements from Cardinal Blaise Kupek of Chicago and Senator Chris Murphy urging action following the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. After the Minneapolis tragedy, Kupek, who is considered close to Leo, released his own statement. Quote, "The facts are clear. Guns are plentiful, and common sense attempts to limit their availability have been largely rejected in the name of a freedom not found in our Constitution," end quote. Well, apparently the Cardinal and the current Pope have never heard of the Second Amendment. Perhaps they should read the U.S. Constitution that they so readily cite as the reasons for their anti-gun stance. They also might, well, want to consult with HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., himself a Roman Catholic, who is at least asking the right questions about all the mass shootings in recent years. As we reported earlier in this broadcast, RFK Jr., he noted that Americans have had easy access to guns since this country was founded nearly 250 years ago. And we never had problems with mass shootings until the last 25 years or so. That indicates that it's, well, something else that's the culprit, not the guns. And Kennedy is concerned about those psychotropic drugs, which have been handed out like candy, well, maybe in the last 25 years, right? So, we know we can also add the breakdown of the American family, the sidelining of biblical values, removal of the 10 Commandments from the schoolroom walls, the pushing of moral relativism, situational ethics, violent pop culture movies, and so much more. So, when a pope tells you he wants the government to grab your guns, you might want to tell him to go pound sand and then withhold all your dollars any way and every way you can from such religious institutions and their leaders. That's the Worldview Report commentary for tonight. If you appreciate our broadcast, we appreciate your support. WorldviewFoundation.com, WorldviewFoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. WorldviewFoundation.com. We're into September now, and we got to make up some ground, folks, because giving drops during the summer months traditionally, and so September and October, we need to see, some good months of strong support. if you would, please. WorldviewFoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail, and our phone number there if you'd rather make a contribution over the phone. Thank you for that. So next time, I'm Brandon House. May God save America. Take care.